Okay, here we are at the memorial for Rynn Berry. And it is March 16, 2014. And the room is filling up with wonderful, awesome people who loved Rynn. Lots and lots of food. And let's move over here to a stack of books, the Vegan Guide to New York City. Here's Christina.
Thank you everybody for coming. My name is Martin Rowe, and like Rynn, I am a publisher and a writer and a runner. I'm going to give you an idea of what's going to happen today, and we've got a bunch of people here who knew Rynn very well, and I'm going to ask them to share their memories of Rynn, and then open it up for everybody to share their thoughts and memories about Rynn. I want to thank the people who organised this, Victoria Moran, who organised this room, but a chef who organised all the food, Pam Rice, who is recording this event and for organising the invitation. Thank you for all bringing tremendous food. It's just huge amounts of food. We were worried there wouldn't be enough food, but the food has also been complemented by Candle Cafe. Benet contributed the chimichurris and the meze plate. That's very kind of her. Thank you for that. And Guy vegn from Beyond Sushi as well. He contributed not only a plate, but he also contributed thoughts about Rynn, which I'll just read right now. The measure of a man is not how he died, but how he lived. Not what he gained, but what did he give. Personally, Rynn Berry gave us unwavering support. Since we've opened, he's come to our restaurant every week. So when our thoughts become overwhelmed by the sadness of his untimely passing, we are comforted by fond memories and try to think of all the good he's done. He's truly a model of what humankind should be. Everyone here at Beyond Sushi sends their kindest wishes. So, thank you. I'd also like to take a moment to mention some honoured guests who are here today. We'll shortly be hearing from Rynn's brother, Charles, and I'd like to acknowledge him and his wife, Catherine, who is here, and their son, Nick, his girlfriend, and Nick's brother, Sam, couldn't be here, he's working too hard. But of course, we're also here to remember the fact that 10 days after Rynn died, his brother, and Charles's brother, Peter, died in Central Park from running and having a heart attack. It was very shocking. So we'll hear from Charles in a moment. I'd also like to acknowledge that, and I think Rynn would love this, that in the audience today is Jane Cullen, who in the early 1980s began the first, as far as I know, the first series of books from a publishing company anywhere in the world on animal rights. So it's a testament to Rynn. She is here today, being a great writer and publisher. And next to her is the philosopher Tom Regan, author of The Case for Animal Rights and 49 other titles, I think is correct, right? Oh. Tom is working with Christina and Charles and other members of the family to ensure that Rynn's considerable archive of books on animals and vegetarianism, as well as all of his papers, end up at the Tom Regan Animal Rights Archive at North Carolina State University, where they'll be used by scholars and interested parties in perpetuity. So Rynn's work will continue. So thank you for attending today. Without more ado, I will ask Charles if he could come up and share a few words about both his.
Like our father and my entire family, Rynn loved New York as a world city. Rynn and my dad and my brothers Elliot and Peter and I all shared a love of writing. Rynn was the most prolific writer of the Berry men, and I'm sure you know and have enjoyed some of his books. He brought a scholarly thoroughness and precision to his historical studies of vegetarianism, veganism, and animal rights movement. His writing and his conversation was also distinguished by his playful sense of humor, his broad vocabulary and colorful turn of phrase. He was erudite, with a broad knowledge of and interest in history, science, and literature. And he was very well traveled, with a particular interest in India and Brazil, both of which he visited many times. His love of travel and writing led him to encourage my father, when he was in his early 90s, to write a memoir about a 10-month trip that my father made around the world in 1937 and 38, just on the eve of World War II. which he published privately just a few years before he died. Rynn was a voracious reader and amassed a remarkable collection of books, including an important archive, as Martin mentioned, of materials on the history of vegetarianism, in addition to a wide range of other subjects. Rynn's love of books and learning brought him to join a library that has been an important part of my family for many years, known as the New York Society Library, of which I was the chairman of the board for 8 years. It's actually the oldest cultural institution in continuous operation in New York City, having been founded in 1754 when the population of New York was 15,000 people, a fact that no doubt delighted Rynn as a historian. Rynn was well known and well beloved at this distinguished library and frequently visited with his backpack bulging with books to return or pick up. Rynn was a private person, modest in his taste and temperament, and well-mannered and thoughtful to others, as he expected others to be of him. At the same time, he did important and visible work in the public arena. For many years, I lived in a loft in Chelsea with my wife and sons, who I'm pleased are here with me today. And we would frequently walk through Union Square and see Rynn at the table he set up to sell his books and talk with interested passers-by on the subjects he knew and loved. At family gatherings with Rynn, many held at our apartment, he would often bring Martinelli's apple cider to celebrate, and I bought a couple of bottles to share today in his memory. I always enjoyed making vegetarian dishes that I hope might pass muster with him. I remember one dish in particular that he appreciated. I got a medieval recipe from the New York Times, and I don't remember all the ingredients, but they included pomegranate and eggplant. Rynn was an ardent and effective animal rights advocate, as you know. A few years ago, we enjoyed discussing together an interesting case I worked on as a lawyer, in which I represented on a pro bono basis the Humane Society of the United States in connection with the charitable trust created by Leona Helmsley. Rynn had a good understanding of the legal issues and the historical difficulties of upholding charitable requests for the benefit of animal welfare. My brothers and I also shared with Rynn a love of Indian food, and sometimes I joined Rynn at a restaurant he recommended and was trying to scope out for his guide. On one particular occasion, the four of us brothers, Rynn, Elliot, Peter, and I, had a cheerful vegetarian lunch at the Jewel of India on 44th Street, no longer exists, in memory of our mutual friend Bill Henry, who was a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and critic, who was a close friend of all four of us. The last meal I shared with Rynn was when we were together with my cousins and others on Christmas Eve. He was excited about his upcoming trip to Brazil, and it was heartening to reflect. It is heartening to reflect on his happy demeanor and the laughs we shared on that occasion. As you know, Rynn never made it to Brazil this time, but died after suffering a heart attack while running in Prospect Park. As I think you know, and as Martin has said, my brother Peter also died while running just a couple of weeks after Rynn in Central Park. The loss of both dear brothers in close succession, some 5 years after my older brother Elliot died, has been hard on the family and all those who knew and loved Rynn and Peter. Peter was also a scholar and a deep and thoughtful reader, as well as a gracious and well-mannered man. He shared with Rynn a love and understanding of the classics, as well as India and its culture and customs. Both were devoted and advanced practitioners of yoga. Peter was terribly upset when he heard of Rynn's death. Through all these sad events, I have found comfort in learning more about how much Rynn touched so many lives. Seeing all of you here today underscores what a full life he did have. My family and I are most grateful for your support and your appreciation of my kind and brilliant brother, Rynn. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. It gives us a context of his life. I wanted to point out that hanging here are some of Rynn's favorite T-shirts collected from all over the world, as well as a Jane costume that he acquired as well, so you can look at that. On the table at the back is a revolving movie, a little movie of photographs of Rynn's life that we put together, Christina and I, celebrating his diverse interests, as well as, of course, his books. The next person I'd like to invite to come and share her thoughts about Rynn is somebody who used his scholarship and brains on a regular basis, Victoria Moran.
Thank you, and thank you. It was so wonderful to get to hear more about Rynn from a family setting and a deeper background. Now, I don't remember not knowing Rynn in my vegetarian vegan life, and that's practically forever. I used to hear him speak at conferences, and then in between times I got to know him better by reading his books, always with a dictionary. That's why I love the Vegan Guide. That was something that Rynn wrote that didn't require a dictionary. And when I moved to New York in 2000, I too would see him in Union Square Park. And I always used to think, Rynn reminds me of somebody. I didn't know who. I just knew there was some sort of resemblance to somebody that I either knew a long time ago or should have known. And it was only recently when I started watching Downton Abbey that I had it. He reminds me of Lord Grim. He had that wonderful, wonderful graciousness and elegance. He was so well-spoken in a way that is rare these days. I got to know Rynn really the best in the past couple of years after I started a program called Mainstreeet Vegan Academy, which trains vegan lifestyle coaches and educators. So people come here from around the world for a little boutique program, but I knew from the moment that I had the idea for the academy that it could not happen without Rynn as the history professor. And I have to say that since he's gone, I have found him to be virtually irreplaceable. But it was so interesting to watch his scholarly way of teaching and relating, because so many of the people that would come to teach, and I suppose myself included, have this idea of, woo, listen to this, and we're going to bring you over, and we're going to do a little song and dance and make the world vegan because we're going to entertain it into you. Rynn was different, always scholarly, always with the highest intellectual standards. Now, for the past few courses with Christine, they put together a wonderful PowerPoint program about the history of vegetarianism, which is wonderful to have, so that there's something solid that tells Rynn's interpretation of vegetarian history from Pythagoras to now. But before the PowerPoint presentation, he would come with notes, usually on legal pad, sometimes written in pencil, and he would study them even in the minutes leading up to when he was going to speak, because he so wanted to give people the very, very best. Even though he knew this like the back of his hand, he had written and spoken about this topic for years, but he would still study his notes just to make sure that it was just right. And it always was. I'll never forget the very first class that Rynn taught, and after he was finished, a young man who was a little bit brash and brazen and kind of knew a lot, and he said, I could listen to Rynn forever, as could we all. But my very favorite memory, and one that I'll always carry with me, but at that class, the Q&A, there was never much Q&A because he said everything. But one woman said, you talked about Genesis 1:29 and how that says that we're supposed to be vegetarian. You talked about John the Baptist as a vegetarian Essene. But people always ask me, what about the loaves and the fishes? And Rynn looked a little bit uncomfortable, and I thought, does he not know the answer? Well, that can't be, because he always knew the answer. And then as he spoke, I realized what it was. It was that to answer that question properly, he had to say something about himself that was not completely humble, stand in the background, as Rynn often tried to be. But in order to answer the question properly, he needed to begin by saying, well, when I translated the New Testament from the Greek, and he went on to say that everywhere in the New Testament where the word fish is used, it's the Greek word for fish. But in that particular story, it's a different word. It's a word that has as its first definition relish, a kind of hummus. Second definition, dessert. Third definition, little fishes. And Rynn told us that evidently some translator at some point had thought that it was more miraculous to multiply fishes than to multiply baba ganoush. And I do find it interesting today that there was some concern that there wouldn't be enough food. I guess it was mostly my concern. And now I see, Rynn, thank you, another miracle of the loaves and tahini. God bless.
I would like to invite Manny Goldman to come up to perhaps talk about Rynn and the days of Big Apple vegetarians. Started of course by
This is completely off the cuff. Rynn was at my wedding. Rynn was, our lives intertwined at many intersections. We often would reminisce about the old days when vegetarians were rare birds. I started my vegetarian journey in 1964, Rynn in 1966. And he always regretted the fact that he knew somebody who was a vegetarian longer than he was. First time I met Rynn actually was when I heard him speak. And it was a small lecture, I don't even remember the venue, some vegetarian group. Somewhere. And he was talking about the history. What was it?
Earthsave, no?
Earthsave New York. That was probably it. Earthsave New York. Thanks, Pam. He was speaking about the history of the implements with which we eat food.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Knives, forks, and spoons. And I was transfixed with his knowledge, his erudite manner, his demeanor. I learned that forks came into widespread use only with the coincidence of widespread consumption of meat. And so it was one of the more relatively modern implements. And ever since then, I can't help but think about that whenever I pick up a fork.
Me too. Me too.
Pam says she does as well. Knives and spoons being much more ancient. But Rynn had a kind of calm, low-key demeanor that belied the substance underneath it. Whatever he said, it was never threatening, but it was always informative. I remember we had a conversation about how annoyed, I was telling him how annoyed I was how non-vegetarians like to throw out that Hitler was a vegetarian, like that made a difference. Hitler didn't like smoking either. Does that mean that smoking was good? And Rynn agreed that it was very annoying, and I said that wasn't even true, because I had read somewhere about Hitler's favorite sausages and things like that. And so Rynn decided to research that and came up with a short book that is a definitive answer that if ever we are annoyed at someone throwing out that Hitler was a vegetarian, just take this book if we can find it and say, no, it's not true, he wasn't. And Rynn had the gravitas and the authority to be able to accomplish that. I miss him dearly. I still can't believe he's gone, really. And he will live on, certainly in my heart and memory forever, as long as my heart and memory continue, and I'm sure with everyone else in this room. Thank you.
Yes, I just promised Karen Davis of United Poultry Concerns that I would read the words she wrote in her most recent Poultry press. Most folks are familiar with Karen Davis, United Poultry Concerns. And she does a biography in honor and memory of Rynn Berry, age 68, who died on January 9, 2014, after collapsing during a run in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, New York, on New Year's Eve. Rynn, who was historical advisor to the North American Vegetarian Society and on the advisory board of Earthsave, was a scholar, writer, lecturer, and activist for animal rights and ethical veganism. His influential books include Food for the Gods, Vegetarianism and the World's Religions, Famous Vegetarians and Their Favorite Recipes, The New Vegetarians, and The Vegan Guide to New York City. In Hitler, neither vegetarian nor animal lover, Rynn shows once and for all that Adolf Hitler and his cronies were not vegetarians or kind to animals, as some have claimed. Rynn Berry was a longtime friend and supporter of United Poultry Concerns, whom Karen Davis, always look forward to seeing each year at the Vegetarian Summerfest in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and the Veggie Pride Parade in New York City, which, by the way, is in 2 weeks. He was a pioneer of the worldwide vegan movement. And then she quotes Martin Rowe. May I? Martin Rowe, founder and publisher of Lantern Books, wrote upon learning of Rynn's death, Rynn's impact was literally incalculable, given how many met him, bought his books, or talked with him at the Union Square Green Market over the years. He was the epitome of the kind of unheralded grassroots activist without which any movement for change cannot grow, and he was a witty and erudite figure, the Dr. Johnson of the vegetarian movement. He will be missed greatly, even by those who never met him, but his work will live on. And that's from Karen Davis, United Poultry Concerns.
The Vegan Guide to New York City, which we have copies of, will be available to all those who advertised in the book to pick up a box of it at the Veggie Pride Parade at the Lantern Books booth as a way of distributing this book, which was just printed before Rynn died. So, as you know, Rynn had an enormous backpack. And I can now actually make this reference and people will know what I'm talking about, which was the progenitor of the TARDIS, in that it was much larger on the inside than it looked like on the outside. And he would carry these books to all the places in New York City that sold it. So not only is it the task of the advertisers to come and pick up their boxes of books, to take them and then disseminate them, but also us as well to continue that work. So we will hopefully have lots of books for you to take and hand out and give to people. They can sell them, they can give them away, whatever they like. So that will happen at the Veggie Pride Parade.
And we will have a memorial service there as well.
And there will also be a memorial reflection and ceremony for him there as well. The next person I'd like to invite to speak is Freya Dinshah of the Vegan Society.
As with, I think, all of you, Rynn was a very dear friend. He was a quiet person, and we enjoyed his wisdom and his stories very much. And so it's wonderful to be together with you, all of his friends. I always think when someone leaves, we make new connections and strengthen the old connections, and that's what we're going to do. I think many of you probably had plans to do things with Rynn as we did, and we will continue with those plans. It may be done a little differently, but we'll carry on in Rynn's spirit, and I thank you all.
I have 2 messages from Rynn's sisters in Florida that were sent by email. So I'll read. This is from Ghislaine Green. I am so proud of my brother, Rynn Berry. He was amazing. I can remember as a young boy, Rynn always loved tennis, swimming, and mostly reading. He later went away to school, and upon his return, I would always break out the crayons and paper and make a huge welcome home banner. He was certainly missed. Much later, he introduced his vegetarian views, which had evolved to a vegan, raw food lifestyle. He shared so much enthusiasm, recipes, and love of animals that I, too, followed his views. Though at times I would fall off the wagon, in quotes, Rynn would encourage me to stay with the program. As a matter of fact, upon Rynn and Christina's many visits, they would be dubbed the vegan police and inspire us to shape up. There are many more stories I think Christina will share with you. The tale of the durian, she says. Rynn had a wicked, keen sense of humor, and he was always very considerate before he spoke. I would love to watch him speak and appreciated how much he contributed to my own personal tapestry in life. Last week, I did participate on the Vegan Holistic Cruise. I spoke with Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. Cullen Campbell, and Dr. Michael Clapper. They all had a great appreciation and admiration for Rynn Berry and his work, and expressed their deepest condolences. I also met so many people that knew of Rynn and his passion. He will be greatly missed. I would like very much to extend my gratitude and affection to Mr. Charles Berry and his family, to Mrs. Rynn Berry Sr., to Mr. Martin Rowe for being by his side, and especially to Christina Abreu Suzuki for always loving and being there for Rynn. You all meant so much to him, and I hope to meet with you all in the near future. Sincerely, Ghislaine Green. So this is from Sigurd Green, or Sai. I was surprised and shocked upon hearing the news that Rynn had passed away, although his passing is still hard to believe. I can honestly say that his guidance on what foods to eat and healthy lifestyle have a daily influence on my family and myself. I am very fortunate to have him as my brother.
What are your thoughts and feelings?
Oh, so sad. We are pain in my heart. So loved Rynn, and so miss him. I really do. Yeah, it's still, still kind of shocked. Like, I still feel his presence here on the planet. He's had such an amazing impact on my life for years and years, since I read his book, Food for the Gods, Vegetarianism and the World's Religions, famous vegetarians and their recipes, his guidebook to New York City. I mean, so much, and interviewing him for WBAI radio got to know him better and how deep, how knowledgeable he was. Yes.
Hi, I'm Louis Guido. I'm affiliated with the Human Species, and I know Rynn Berry as a friend and an extraordinary writer. I just wish I had known Rynn more closely. I met him through several events. I found Rynn to be a gentle person, honest. He crosses T's and strives to be very accurate. And I use his books in references when I made my arguments, so his books came in very handy.